Hello, welcome to the 2013 Hundie Challenge. Today we're going to be discussing Hummers in Bondage by Summer Lovin'. Dee-doo-dee-doo-doo, dee-doo-doo-doo-dee-doo-doo-doo-doo, dee-doo-dee-doo-doo, dee-doo-doo-doo-dee-doo-doo-doo. There was a point in time, not too long ago, maybe a few weeks ago, when I was listening to Lolita on my audiobook in my car, and I was reading Of Human Bondage and The Naked and the Dead, all simultaneously. And it occurred to me that what a deranged pervert I would look like out of, context, just looking at, say, my Goodreads wall, or if I was carrying all those books around and a cop stopped me. No, I swear, officer, I have to read these. I'm reading all the classics this year. But that being said, Of Human Bondage, despite the jokes, has very little to do with human sexuality. It is kind of a broad, I don't know what you would call it, Bildungsroman, I guess. So it does, attempt to create a sort of a holistic, universal field theory. I understand why it's considered great, why it's considered greater than the average novel. This was definitely, without delving into long, maybe Kantian, or just sort of prose statements of philosophy, it really weaved a lot of philosophy into the narrative, and especially into the thoughts that the main character, Philip Carey, is kind of consistently having. So, yes, he might reflect on something and have a couple of long paragraphs thinking about, life, the universe, and everything. But it wasn't it didn't feel like Malm was taking detours away from the story to get to that. I actually read a really good review, not a really good review, just a witty, succinct review. And I think it said something like, this book, it was just one sentence. It's like, this book is about a man with a club foot who has a terrible girlfriend. And that was the whole review. And I thought it was hilarious because that's pretty much it. Philip Carey is born with a club foot, which I gather is exactly what it sounds like your foot is shaped like this, kind of, which is, not the end of the world, much less the end of the world today. It does cause you to limp, and it is noticeable, so it's a noticeable deformity that in the late 19th century, well, obviously this was written in the 20th century to be on this list, but it takes place in the late 19th century. And presumably at that time, medicine couldn't really do anything about a club foot. Now, later on, much, much, much later in the novel, Philip does actually have a surgery that helps it somewhat. But for the beginning of the book, and most of it, his club foot sort of informs who he is as a person. And he's basically, he's overly, well, I don't know if overly sensitive is the right way to describe it. He's very sensitive, and he is kind of constantly feels like people are talking about his club foot, even if they're not, because it's often enough that he turns around and catches them, and they are, that he thinks it's a kind of a constant recurrence. So his whole kind of personality outlook on life is, and it's a very unkind word that we don't really use today, but, he's handicapped. He was what you would call a cripple, and everyone never let him forget it. And I think it's a recurring theme in the book that even if people were being civil with him, he always knew if they got mad enough that they would call him a cripple, and that was kind of the one thing that would wound him. So in a sense, his inner life is informed by his outer body to an excessive extent. He's very unlucky in love for most of the book, and most of that is actually due to one woman. Now I'm trying to remember her name. Mildred, because it was a really funny name. Her name is Mildred, and this is I gotta give Somerset Maugham props. I don't know if they called them props back then. I gotta give him credit, shall we say, for writing a very realistic, dysfunctional relationship. It's unfair to say that Mildred is entirely the problem. It's very unfair to say that, in fact. Because basically how their relationship starts is this woman is a waitress in a restaurant that Philip frequents. And over time, because she works there, he ends up just going there constantly. And because he has his eye on her, he begins to kind of take liberties. So he'll insist on being seated in her section, and he'll be offended if she's not paying enough attention to him, and he'll act like their relationship as a customer and service provider entitles him to certain things, and he'll get jealous when she's paying too much attention to other customers and this sort of thing. So for a good chunk of the book, you get the feeling that Philip is the one that's, off his nut. And she keeps telling him, she's like, you're a nice guy. I don't like you. I'm not attracted to you. I don't mind serving you. I would even call you a friend if you don't take that to heart. But we're not going to be an item. So this goes on and on and on and on. And Philip gets very stalkerish and just keeps bothering her until he finally realizes that he can use his money. And he doesn't really have much money, but he's got more money than a poor waitress. And he begins to use his money as a cudgel, and eventually gets her to agree to go on dates and things because she wants shit. Because she's a poor waitress and she wants shit, so she lets him buy her shit. And then you got to admit that Philip was in the wrong for the beginning. And then as time progresses, she begins to essentially prostitute herself, although they never really have a sexual relationship. It's always just very dysfunctional. There are even times when she outright offers to prostitute herself, like, give me money and I will sleep with you. But at this point, Philip is like, look, I'm just giving you money to take care of you and your poor baby who are out on the street. I am not interested in you anymore. That's like the whole relationship goes whole circle. And then she goes crazy and she cuts up all his shit, even though, he took care of her when no one else would. He gave her money when she was poor and a single mother, which was, would have made you a pariah back in those days. So she kind of turned on her, what do they call it in the Inferno? She turned on her benefactor, So it was a very dysfunctional relationship. And that's kind of the crux of the book is, Philip growing up as a young man, trying to come to terms with his deformity. And he's always looking for different jobs. He can never quite settle down. And then the center, what kind of holds the center part together is this really twisted relationship with this waitress / streetwalker / Typhoid Mary. She kind of gets some kind of VD later on, and she doesn't care. She keeps being a streetwalker. That kind of is the center of that piece. And then woven throughout the whole book is a lot of very heavy philosophy. It's a lot of religion and coming of age and growing up stuff in the beginning. And when he becomes an atheist in Paris, then there's a lot about art, because he's an art student for a while, a lot about medicine and, the differences between the classes in England at the time, because he becomes a medical student, which is not quite what a gentleman would do, but it's, a craft, and then he gets to work with the lower classes. And then towards the end, it's about, death and his uncle and his aunt and his uncle dying. And he was always an orphan because he was obviously taken care of by his godparents. So overall, very certainly it kept my attention. Certainly very philosophical. Certainly one of the greater works on this list. Very, very good. Check it out. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.